Gopijana Vallabha Girivaradhari Yashodanandana Vrajajana Ranjana Yashodanandana Vrajajana Ranjana Jamuna Tiravanachari Jamuna Tiravanachari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Gopijana Vallabha Girivaradhari Gopijana Vallabha Girivaradhari Yashodanandana Vrajajana Ranjana Yashodanandana Vrajajana Ranjana Jamuna Tiravanachari Jamuna Tiravanachari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Kunja Bihari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Jayam Vishnupad Paramahamsa Paribrajakacharya Astotarashata Shri Srimad His Divine Grace Abhay Charanaravinda Bhakti Vedanta Goswami Maharaj Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai ISKCON BBT Founder Acharya His Divine Grace Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai Anantakota Vaishya Vrinda Ki Jai Namacharya Srila Haridas Thakur Ki Jai ISKCON Guru Vrinda Ki Jai Prem Sikaho Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shivasari Gaura Bhakti Vrinda Ki Jai Shri Shri Radha Krishna Gopa Gopinath Shamakunda Radhakunda Giri Govardhan Ki Jai Shri Vrindavan Dham Ki Jai Shri Navadvip Mayapur Dham Ki Jai Shri Jagannath Puri Dham Ki Jai Nu Govardhan Dham Ki Jai Ganga Mai Ki Jai Yamuna Mai Ki Jai Bhakti Devi Ki Jai Bhakti Devi Ki Jai Samveda Bhakti Vrinda Ki Jai Prihat Mridanga Ki Jai Shri Hari Nam Sankirtan Ki Jai Kartik Pratik Ki Jai Sithai Gaur Premanandi All glories to thee, Son of the Lord, all glories to thee, Son of the Lord, all glories to the Son of the Lord, all glories to the divine lotus feet of Shri Shri Guru and Shri Gauranga, all glories to Shri Prabhupada. Hey, Hare Krishna. Why, thank you. Please offer candles while Dharmadharastakam is still in the air. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Narayanam namaskrityam naram chaiva narottamam devim sarasvatim vyasam tato jayam udirayat. Before reciting the Srimad Bhagavatam, which is our very means of conquest, let us first offer our respectful obeisances unto the personality of Godhead Narayan, unto Narayan Rishi, the supermost human being, unto Mother Saraswati, the goddess of learning, unto Srila Vyasadeva, the author, and unto Srila Prabhupada. So, we are reading from the Srimad Bhagavatam, 6th canto, 1st chapter, the history of the life of Ajamil, text number 46. And do have a question here, Dravida Prabhu. On the 3rd line, how do you pronounce that? Vaichit is, I don't see a dot under it. Is it Riyat or is it? So, Vaichit Riyat, like that. Okay, yeah, so it's not a Ri, it's like a Riyat. Yeah. Vaichit Riyat. Okay, thank you. Yeah, I was trying to figure that one out this morning. Thank you. Yata. Iha. Oh, wait a second.
Go from the verse itself.
Yeah, okay, sorry. Yateha Deva Pravaras Trivijam Upalabhyate Bhuteshu Guna Vaichityat Tatanyatranumiyate Tatanyatranumiyate Yateha Deva Pravaras Trivijam Upalabhyate Bhuteshu Gunavaichitriyat Tatanyatranumiyate Yateha Deva Pravaras Trivijam Upalabhyate Bhuteshu Gunavaichitriyat Tatanyatranumiyate Yateha Deva Pravaras Trivijam Upalabhyate Bhuteshu Gunavaichitriyat Tatanyatranumiyate. Pravaras Trivijam Upalabhyate Bhuteshu Gunavaichitriyat Tatranumiyate. Trivijam Upalabhyate Anyone else? Ladies?
Sorry.
Okay. The board's here. Okay. All right. So, word meanings. Huh? Oh, word meanings. Yata, just as. Iha, in this life. Deva pravara, pravara, O best of the demigods. Trividyam, three kinds of attributes. Upalabhyate, are achieved. Bhuteshu, among all living entities. Guna Vaichitryat, because of the diversity of the contamination by the three modes of nature. Tata, similarly. Anyatra, in other places. Anumiyate, it is inferred. Translation and purport by His Divine Grace, Srila Prabhupada. O best of the demigods, we can see three different varieties of life which are due to the contamination of the three modes of nature. The living entities are thus known as peaceful, restless, and foolish, as happy, unhappy, or in between, or as religious, irreligious, and semi-religious. We can deduce that in the next life, these three kinds of material nature will similarly act. Please repeat. O best of the demigods. We can see three different varieties of life, which are due to the contamination of the three modes of nature. The living entities are thus known as peaceful, restless, and foolish, as happy, unhappy, or in between, or as religious, irreligious, and semi-religious. We can deduce that in the next life, these three kinds of material nature will similarly act. Srila Prabhupada's purport. The actions and reactions of the three modes of material nature are visible in this life. For example, some people are very happy, some are very distressed, and some are in mixed happiness and distress. This is the result of past association with the modes of material nature, goodness, passion, and ignorance. Since these varieties are visible in this life, we may assume that the living entities, according to their association with the different modes of material nature, will be happy, distressed, or between the two in their next lives also. Therefore, the best policy is to disassociate oneself from the three modes of material nature and be always transcendental to their contamination. This is possible only when one fully engages in the devotional service of the Lord, as Krishna confirms in Bhagavad Gita, 14th chapter, 26th verse. Mam chayo vyabhicharena bhakti yogena sevate sagunan samati chaitan brahma bhuyaya kalpate. One who engages in full devotional service, who does not fall down under any circumstance, at once transcends the modes of material nature, and thus comes to the spiritual platform. Unless one is fully absorbed in the service of the Lord, one is subject to the contamination of the three modes of material nature, and must therefore suffer from distress or mixed happiness and distress. Om Jnanatimirandasya Ganan Shalakaya Chakshuru Militanyana Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha Sri Chaitanya Mano Bistam Stapitam Yena Bhutale Swayam Rupakada Mayam Dadati Svapadantikam Vandeham Shri Guru Shri Yuta Padakamalam Shri Gurun Vaishnavamscha Shri Rupam Sagrajatam Sahagana Raghunatam Vitam Tam Sajivam Sadvaitam Savadutam Perijana Sahitam Shri Krishna Chaitanya Devam Hey Krishna Karuna Sindhu Dino Bando Jagatpate Gopesha Gopika Kanta Radha Kanta Namostate Jaya Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Sri Advaita Gadadhar Shivasari Gaura Bhakta Vrinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare Vanchakalpatarubhyascha Kripa Sindhubhyevacha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha Hare Krishna. Might have missed some of that. I didn't get so much rest last night. So, this is a nice continuation of the Yamadutas answering the questions of the Vishnu Dutas, because we know the scene, right? There was the altercation at the bedside of Ajamil, and the Yamadutas who'd never been checked in their dharmic duties of escorting deserving souls to their master Yamaraj for proper judgment and punishment. So they were quite astounded that these, but they could also see that these are very special personalities. These aren't, ordinary rabble-rousers. Didn't just stumble out of the pub and, try to protect their friend. Rather, they were there on a very unique mission, right? They had heard their master's name chanted. And because spiritual beings are completely transcendental, we use this word a lot, right? They're transcendental to time, to space, to the three material modes of nature. So for them to appear instantly at the bedside of Ajamil is not difficult at all, right? It's not difficult at all. There's absolutely no material contamination upon them. So their activities are in no way hampered by the reactions to previous activities, right? So, and the Yamadutas, they've understood this just by looking at them. And, first they're saying, "Who are you?" Then I think a verse or two ago, they were recognizing, I believe, was it yesterday, 2 days ago? "O inhabitants of Vaikuntha, you are sinless." So the Yamadutas, they figured out pretty quickly, in today's verse they're saying, "O best of the demigods," like that. So they figured out pretty quickly who these personalities are, and rather than try to, argue with them with the intention of, somehow stopping them, they're just explaining, they're answering their questions, why, they're trying to convince them why we're doing what we're doing, because according to the authorized books of knowledge, the Dharma Shastras, the Manu Samhita, how this material world generally works, we're here on a very prescribed mission, right? We're in the right. But at the same time, they can appreciate who these personalities are, so they're being quite respectful. They're not trying to force the issue. And they couldn't, actually. And they apparently realized that. But they're explaining very nicely, that everyone in the material world, because the Vishnu Dutas had said who is subject to punishment and who is not, like that, and they're explaining that everyone in the material world who is engaged in fruitive activities, whether sinful or pious, these are still fruitive activities, and that there will be reactions. And like they're pointing out in today's verse, that these three modes of material nature, they produce different types of consciousness, they produce different types of results. And all of the people, they are also still subject in some way or another to reactions in this material world. Generally, some modes are very gross, right? Some are kind of somewhat gross, and then the mode of goodness is more subtle, right? But we also understand that the modes of nature, being Krishna's energies, are very dynamic. They're never static. It's not like, here's goodness, here's passion, here's ignorance, okay, I'm over here, But we understand that they're always like a cauldron. They're always mixing and intermixing, right? So just like I think Bhajanarayan Swami Maharaj gave the example the other day about your three primary colors, right? And from those three primary colors, you get the whole unlimited variegation of color. And like if someone's an artist, for instance, who does visual arts, they know that by the slightest variety of mixing, these colors and mixing in some white and mixing in, like you can get unlimited variations of color, right? So in the same way, these three primary principal modes of nature are there, and we are, according to our inclination and our desire and our interests, we are associating with these modes. And it's always a mix of the modes, right? From our previous lives, we have some particular sukriti, so we may have some particular, like they're pointing out here, that living energy known as peaceful, restless, and foolish. So one may come into this life in a pretty sattvic position and be pretty peaceful, right? But by association with the lower modes of nature, one may get pulled into a more restless state or a more foolish state of consciousness, right? It's very common that people perform activities and later regret them, right? I regret that I performed that activity, right? So what does that indicate? It indicates that by their general nature, they have a certain way of doing things, they have a certain way of relating with each other, they have a certain way of treating others, of living their lives, but they may get carried away by the mode of passion, right? It creates intense desire and longings and, I want it. I need it. There's a difference between wants and needs, but sometimes if we subject ourselves to the influence of the mode of passion, then wants can become conceived of as needs, right? Right. So, it's in the 3rd chapter of the Bhagavad Gita, Lord Krishna, 2nd chapter, also the 3rd chapter, but he explains how this fire gets going, right? One is contemplating these objects of the senses, but at a certain point, like the lust takes over, and then it's just like a fire, and it just burns up our reasoning, and one just completely loses it, and engages in very undesirable activities. So, and these things are going on. And if a person is thoughtful, they may be able to recognize this. We recognize the grossest, lowest modes of nature because by Krishna's grace, we've had the association of devotees, right? And our life has improved, and our tastes have become upgraded perhaps from what they were, at least in my case. They become, so you notice at least the grossest modes of material nature, they start to become, obviously undesirable, right? But then still we are in this, milieu of the modes of nature, and we have our past conditioning, we have our samskaras. A lot of us, quote-unquote, first-generation devotees, we had very bad samskaras. We had very deep attachments to enjoying this material nature in so many ways. And I can tell you frankly that we struggle with these things for our whole lives, practically. We know what is the right path of action, and we even know how to do it. And we know that if we associate with devotees, we'll be able to do it. But at the same time, one has to very, very consciously be introspective and try to see what is motivating me to act in different ways, and to be very careful not to add fuel to these fires of lustful samskaras that are there in our heart, that are there in our mind, right? So, these modes are always there, and one should never think, that now I'm a learned person and I'm safe, right? There's that one verse, I believe it's in the Bhagavatam, Matra svasva duhitrava navivikta sanobavet balavan indriyagramo I didn't get a lot of rest. Vidvamsam apikarshati, that one should not sit on the same seat even with one's own mother, sister, or daughter. Why? Because balavan indriyagramo, because these indriyas, these senses are so strong and impetuous, right? Balavan, strong. These senses are so strong. This that they can forcibly carry away the mind, even of a man of discrimination, who is endeavoring to control their senses. One is engaged in strenuously trying to control the mind and senses for spiritual development, right? But if one is not careful, even such a learned person can become swept away. And we've seen this again and again and again, right? We have our classics like Vishwamitra. He was the great king who became the great Brahmin, and he became a great Brahmarshi. And I mean, this guy, excuse me, my own lack of culture. This great sage was so powerful, it's actually recorded that at one point he was trying to send one of his followers to the heavenly planets, and the Devas were like, no, you can't do that. He's not qualified, he hasn't followed the proper criterion. And they were pushing him back down, and the Vishwamitra was pushing him back up, and finally he just said, okay, what the heck, forget these guys. He created his own heavenly planet or something and sent the guy up there, so powerful personalities, people who can create planets. I mean, we hear about these mystic powers, in Kali Yuga. I mean, mystic yogis are like, the guy can make like a Pop-Tart appear or something, and hand it to somebody, or an apple, and of course if it's in India, it's probably got, a few bad spots. But anyway, but actually, real success in the yoga system through genuine austerity, right? These people, Hiranyakashipu performed such austerity that he basically controlled the universe, right? In a bad way. Dhruva Maharaj, very innocently, was performing austerity in such a way in yogic trance that he inadvertently was controlling the universe, right? Everybody started like not having enough air because he was holding his breath in his meditation, but he had become so powerful through that austerity, without even realizing it, that he was actually freezing all the air circulation in the universe. So the demigods were like, go to Brahma, go talk to this guy, you gotta save the situation, right? So, this is how powerful personalities can become. But even someone like Vishwamitra, when he was agitated by the celestial Apsara Menika, right? He fell a victim to that allurement, right? He fell victim to that Rajaguna, that allurement that if I unite with this woman, it will be very wonderful. I will feel great happiness, right? So, these samskaras are there, and even people who have very strenuously tried to control themselves can fall victim, right? So, we can never underestimate the potency of the three modes of material nature, right? One time Srila Prabhupada said, and I'm paraphrasing, Durita can correct me, but something like, the problem with you Americans is you're not afraid enough of Maya, right? So these three modes of material nature, these are, the modes of material nature. Maya is the predominating personality of the material nature, and these are her energies. I mean, ultimately they're Krishna's, right? But Prabhupada said we're not afraid enough of how these modes of nature can attract us and can ensnare us, right? So, and this, there is the gross manifestations, right? Like someone becomes very lusty, or the mode of ignorance, somebody is living in a very degraded state of consciousness, right? Someone is eating abominable things, someone is smoking abominable things, someone is never bathing, someone, sometimes we used to, when I was a brahmachari here, there was a young man who used to walk down the alley at 2 in the morning, having very animated conversations, and you look out the window thinking there were 2 people about to have a fight, and then you saw it was one guy. But he was so much merged into the mode of Tama that he had become probably haunted. And so he was, we had a son, so we went through the whole Lord of the Rings books and movies, and so, you had that little guy, right, who had the, what was his name, the little guy, anyway. Anyway, he was extremely schizophrenic, right? So he was always having these inner dialogues with the 2 parts of himself, and in that case it was kind of the good and evil, right? So this is a very graphic manifestation of association with the mode of ignorance, that we can become completely degraded. We can even get to the point where another entity can take us over completely, because our own consciousness is like just on autopilot, like it's just so out to lunch that like somebody else can just, a subtle being, a ghostly being can just come in and take over and themselves start enjoying grossly sinful activities through that body, right? So these are very graphic, you know, and then you have the suave, you know, James Bond, you know, like these archetypical playboy guys, you know, they're driving fast cars and shooting big guns. And yeah, I heard once Prabhupada was on a plane and one of those type of movies was on, you know, and they're kind of unavoidable. Not that Prabhupada was really watching it, but at one point Prabhupada turned to his servant and said, "Isn't he dead yet?" You know, you know, because you know you see these guys, you know, it's like the enemy guys are like, you know, dying left and right and falling all over the place and falling off of bridges and falling out of airplanes, and this guy's just walking down the street with his gun, you know. It's like somehow or other nobody ever hits him, right? You know, but so we have these archetypical, you know, bigger than life, you know, personifications of the modes of nature, right? And so, you know, we kind of get that, but then these modes have their subtleties, you know, and as we pursue the devotional path, like sometimes it's said that the subtle forms, right, like we have the gross forms of the modes, but then we have the subtle forms. You know, one subtle form is like the desire for profit, adoration, and distinction. So sometimes that's termed to be the subtle form of sex desire. So sex desire is a great manifestation of the modes of passion, that I want to be the enjoyer, I want to be the controller. I mean, this is why we're here. The whole reason we're here is because we decided that rather than enjoying as a subordinate enjoyer with wonderful Krishna, I want to be the predominating enjoyer. I want to be at center stage, you know. I want to be the guy, right? I want to be the controller. I want to be the enjoyer. I want to be the centerpiece of everything. I want everything to revolve around me. That's why we're here, right? And so wanting to be that big, suave, debonair enjoyer that, you know, gets all the girls and kills all the bad guys and gets all the recognition and gets all the fast cars and all that, you know. So that's a very gross manifestation. So we give all that up, but then that can insidiously come up in our spiritual life, that we want to be recognized, the desire for profit, adoration, and distinction. You know, this doesn't look nearly as bad, but it can knock us out of the ring just as much. You know, like these are very, very dangerous, you know. And it's amazing if we monitor our consciousness, like, you know, I didn't have to worry about this stuff for like 20 years because I was just out there working and, you know, trying to support my family, and like I knew I was in Maya, and like, you know, there wasn't much, you know, who was I trying to fool when I'm, you know, out at the mall, you know, with karmic clothes on, you know, like, you know, such a great devotee, you know, excuse me, sir, did you get, you know, did you buy one of these paintings? You know, but then you come back into the orbit of devotees, and I've been catching myself every time I do anything, even if I screw it up, I'm thinking, hey, did I do that good? You know, is somebody thinking like, you know, did I hit that note right? Did I give a good class? You know, it's like the mind is just constantly like right there, like, and it's so disgusting. I mean, it just really, you know, it's very disappointing. Let's put it that way. It's disheartening, you know. And these are the struggles that we sadhakas, you know, it's part of our struggle, is that not only do we have to give up, you know, the big four, right? But we have to give up the subtle forms of the big four. You know, we have to give up these desires to be recognized, to be the enjoyer. And, you know, in the beginning, you know, somehow or other get the mind to think of Krishna. When Prabhupada started this movement, it was all about dovetailing, right? He was encouraging the young people that were coming to, yes, go on doing what you're doing. People like Mukunda Maharaj, Hayagriva, they wanted to write a song about Narada Muni, the transcendental spaceman. Prabhupada encouraged them, you know what I mean? Like, so Prabhupada was dovetailing. All these musicians that were jamming all night around New York started hearing about this Swami who had this amazing transcendental chant going on early in the morning. So some of them would come rolling into his Bowery loft after playing in clubs all night. You know what I mean? And Prabhupada encouraged them, yes, here, check out this beautiful spiritual music. Because he knew that if they took up the chanting, everything would change gradually and progressively, right? So we have this process, and in the beginning, we're dovetailing our propensities in Krishna's service, and it's great. But The process is meant to purify us beyond all material contamination, like we're reading about today. We have to become free from these material contaminations, right? And they will keep attacking us, in subtler and subtler forms until we get to the point where our sole object of devotion is the service of the Lord and the spiritual master and the Vaishnavas. Like when we actually develop that attitude, when we really develop that attitude that, like Lord Chaitanya, what did he say? I'm not a Brahmin, I'm not a sannyasi, I'm not a Vaishya, I'm not a Shudra, I'm not a Kshatriya. When all through the Varnas, all through the ashrams, what am I? The servant of the servant of the servant. 1,000 times the servant of the dearmost servant of the gopis, right? So this is the attitude that ultimately we have to develop. Like another time Lord Chaitanya said, I have no love for Krishna. I mean, we know he's the pinnacle of love for Krishna, right? But he said, I have no love for Krishna. If I had any love for Krishna, I couldn't live in this material world for even a moment without him. So this is like the gold standard of devotion, that what really motivates us. Krishnadas Kaviraj in his Chaitanya Charitamrita, in one of the foundational verses, sometimes I've heard devotees call it a great benediction verse. He says, may that Lord, who is known as the son of Mother Sachi, be transcendentally situated in the innermost chambers of your heart, right? So the innermost chambers of your heart, we are motivated by what is most dear to us. And if Lord Chaitanya is transcendentally situated in the innermost chambers of our heart, that means that all of our activities are being motivated by our attraction to his wonderful transcendental form, resplendent with the radiance of molten gold. This amazing form. He's appeared in the age of Kali to bestow what no incarnation has ever offered before. And I know there's different translations of this, and Jyotika can correct me. The most sublime and radiant knowledge of the transcendental taste of his service and conjugal love. It's one of the, something like that, right?
Combining the two versions, but that's okay.
Okay, combining the two versions. Yeah, what can I do? Been around a while. So, anyway, the idea of the benediction is that let Lord Chaitanya and his service, let the spiritual master and devotional service, let the servants of Lord Chaitanya who are my masters, let them be my most cherished possession, right? Let the dust from the lotus feet of the Vaishnavas be my treasure. Let me bathe in the water that has washed the lotus feet of the devotees. So this is the mood that we have to kind of zero in on, taking ourself out of the center and really trying to become the servant. Bhavananda Prabhu told a nice story. Many years ago in Mayapur, he was the GBC and one of the leaders, he and Jai Pitaka Maharaj. So anyway, he was the leader of the community, and one time Srila Prabhupada came, and they had these two young pujaris who had showed up, these brothers from England, Pankajangri and Jananivas Prabhu. And they were nice, quiet devotees. They were serving the deities very faithfully. So one time Srila Prabhupada arrived from a world tour and sat down with the leader of the community, Bhavananda, and just started talking and glorifying Jananivas Prabhu. And he was just asking about him and talking about him and glorifying him. And Bhavananda said he was thinking, oh, you mean the pujari? Like he hadn't really understood. And then from that he began to realize what a glorious devotee, right? What a glorious pair of devotees these brothers were. And if everybody who's gone to Mayapur and seen them in action and come to know them over the years and decades, they started serving there in 1971 or 72. 2022, unfortunately, or maybe 21, His Grace Pankajangri Prabhu left this world back home, back to Godhead. Jananivas Prabhu is still there, but they just faithfully serving all those 50 years, just serving the deities. And if you see them, they're just like bubbling over with the mood of loving service to Sri Sri Radhamadava, to Sri Sri Panchatattva, and they're guiding all the devotees and inspiring all the devotees in the Pujari department, not just in Mayapur, but all over the world. They actually started that Mayapur Academy because Srila Prabhupada wanted that Jananivas Prabhu would teach deity worship because Prabhupada so much appreciated his devotion, right? But one thing you'll notice when you observe those devotees is that they really have that mood of the servant, of the servant, of the servant, of the servant, right? They're just in there. They're like Jayananda Prabhu, like you hear that famous story when somebody asked him, how do you make advancement? He said, I don't know, I'm too busy serving to think about it, right? So they have that same mood, that mood of just wanting to serve according to our capacity. And this is actually the mood that will elevate us, protect us, and insulate us from the very subtle, effects of the modes of nature, which are always mixing and due to our previous samskaras, always to whatever degree, attracting our consciousness, right? And we just have to be honest, be introspective, look for these contaminations within ourselves. We tend to see them in everybody else, at least myself, right? But we have to learn the art of looking for them in ourselves, right? I had this experience. I would travel a lot, and I was doing business, and Lord Chaitanya talks a lot about the contaminations of business in the Chaitanya Charitamrita, in the section about the cleansing of the Gundicha temple. They got all the big dirt out, but then they got down to the little dirt, and they just kept going and going. And Prabhupada was quoting his spiritual master, Srila Bhaktisiddhanta, about all these subtle contaminations of business, because it's this whole profit mentality, right? And so anyway, I was out there doing that a lot. Sometimes I'd be traveling for weeks on end doing business, and then I'd come back to a temple somewhere. And I remember I'd be standing in the kirtan, tilaked up and dhodied up, and thinking I was a devotee. And I'd just start noticing all the faults, whatever was wrong, and all the faults of the devotees, and this guy, and that could be better. And then I was realizing it's not them, it's me. It's this contamination that's so deeply rooted in my own heart. And I was reflecting on that purport in my case, because I was seeing how by doing business you get this certain mentality, and you're seeing everything in a very material, calculating way, rather than seeing that here are the blissful devotees who have dedicated their lives to Krishna's service, right? So that's how we should see the devotees. Here are these amazing souls that are serving Krishna. How can I serve them? And by really entering into that mood as, given to us by Lord Chaitanya and by Srila Prabhupada and by our spiritual masters and by the parampara, then, we can protect ourselves from these more subtle aspects of the modes of nature, which are always trying to do their thing, right? Maya has that thankless task of testing every soul until their devotion actually becomes, like this verse in the Bhagavad Gita, undeviating, who does not fall down under any circumstances, one who engages in full devotional service, who does not fall down under any circumstance, at once transcends the modes of material nature and thus comes to the spiritual platform. Actually, I read that verse in purport this morning and trying to study a little bit, and it's nice. It's mentioned there that verse is the reply to Arjuna's third question. Arjuna's question was, what is the means of attaining to the transcendental position, right? And the means of attaining to the transcendental position is this full devotional service, not falling down, undeviating under any circumstance like that. That's how one comes to that platform. And there's no way that we can come to that platform without the mercy of Guru and Vaishnavas, right? So by serving our spiritual masters, by serving the devotees, this is a way to become fully absorbed, because, sometimes the curtains close, there's no deity seva to do, or it's not time to go out on books, but we can always just be in that attitude and try to serve each other, try to serve the devotees, just always looking for an opportunity, right? According to our abilities and our propensities and our inclinations, we can try to render a little service, right? Just try to really be in that mood as much as we can, and know that that will protect us. Probably give that nice example of the cup of milk, right? It's a beautiful, simple example, that if you have a cup of milk and the milk is full, there's a chance, like say somebody poured some ink in there, right? It would become contaminated. But if the milk is not just full, but it's ever being filled, right? Like somebody's pouring a pitcher of milk into a cup and the milk's coming out over the top, and somebody comes and tries to throw something in there and it just washes out the top, right? So in the same way, if our cup of devotional seva is just over brimming, it's just always over flooding, and so then there's no room, there's no time, there's no space for us to get deviated from our devotional service. So Anyway, I'll stop there. And, oh yeah, one other point, just in reading that purport to the Bhagavad Gita verse, there was something that caught my eye. It was an explanation of what Bhakti Yoga means. Anyone want to make it, besides Javeda, anyone want to make a guess of what in that purport Prabhupada says Bhakti Yoga means? The Lord is there, the devotee is there, and the activity of the exchange of love between the Lord and the devotee is there. So this is the meaning of Bhakti Yoga. The Lord is there, the devotee is there, and the activity of exchange of love between the Lord and the devotee is there. It's nice, isn't it? Yeah, so anyway, I'll end there. Any corrections, comments, questions?
Just one little note on that last point. Prabhupada was fond of that verse from the Chaitanya Chandramrita, which is the first part is that kaivalyam narakayate, that for a devotee the impersonal Brahman merging in, that's what kaivalya means here, because there's no Lord, you don't have a form yourself, and there's no process of bhakti. So it's only attractive to those who are looking negatively. How can I get away from birth, old age, disease, and death? But it's all self-centered ultimately. So that's why Sridhar Swami in his commentary on the second verse, Dharma Projita Kaitavo, that the cheating Dharma includes the desire for liberation. That verse, even liberation, because that you can also fall into that, where you don't want to disturb your situation, so you don't take on any services that you think might disturb it. And so you're basically doing devotional service for your own benefit. That creeps in. And but that's not the mood. Lord, Prabhupada said, "Oh no, anxiety is there. Anxiety for serving Krishna, for spreading, but it's transcendental, so it produces bliss." But also the whole mood of the import of your class, and thank you for a very nice class, is proactive. In other words, it's not just sitting down and meditating. It's not even just sitting down and chanting japa alone in Vrindavan somewhere. That's not it. It's all like activity, and prime activity is the Harinam Sankirtan. You're hearing, you're chanting, you're dancing, you're trying to get other people. In other words, this was Lord Chaitanya's revolution, and that's practical. You mentioned how Prabhupada started the movement, and he saw, Krishna brought him down into touch to an area. Yes, it's the Bowery, but it was also the place where you had cheap places where the musicians could rent. Like Mukunda Maharaj had his loft, the Bowery loft. So there you had the music, which is such an essential thing. That they were attracted by that, and they heard the holy name, and a certain number of them became attracted in that way. So that's Prabhupada's mood. But as you said, to always, being active in your devotional service, looking way to serve, because that proactivity will keep them at bay. If you get too, I remember we had a bhakti here a long time ago before anyone else was here. Maybe you remember him. And he looked very promising, but he was always assessing his own situation. I was feeling a little bliss the other day, but then it left me, and I don't know what can I do about that. It's just like the actual teaching is, if you really want to be blissful in Krishna consciousness, forget all about your own bliss. Just worry about Krishna's bliss, spiritual master's bliss, the other devotees' bliss. In other words, servant, and you'll find yourself in bliss.
Thank you, Deveda Prabhu. Balaram Prabhu? Oh, he's got the book out.
Oh, I just take notes during the class, but just, and that you're mentioning with profit, these three words, profit, adoration, distinction, which Prabhupada brings up and throughout his books, but specifically I think it's the second canto. It's talking about purifying the heart, or it might be the first canto actually. Anyways, but so profit, adoration, distinction, this is subtle. These are like subtle contaminations. A lot of the times, when people think about like subtle contaminations, they may think of somebody like in the renounced order of life or something. they've given up gross stuff, but now they're dealing with subtle. But also this, I think it's healthy and good for people to consider, for anybody in any social position in their life, these subtle things, profit, adoration, distinction, because a lot of the times I find myself thinking of that, profit, adoration, distinction, that's something for the sannyasis or something. They're dealing with the profit. Hopefully not, but hopefully if they've transcended. But so then I was thinking profit. Okay, so for sannyasi, you say collecting, right, money and being, unduly being greedy and trying to collect, stack up. But also, whatever social position one may be in life, that could also be there. That same contamination. Similarly with adoration, I find myself, you think of a sannyasi or something, adoration, right? It's like a adorable position in a sense that for some people anyways, that, okay, look at this person, he's so renounced and this and that, followers, and people are adoring that person. But again, also, it could be there, it is there, and should be seen as possible, and not just possible, but as a contamination and other social positions also.
Absolutely.
Just the idea of, I was thinking in the realm of couples, couples means husband, wife, or children and all this. The idea of wanting undue attention, it's a form of adoration. I need undue attention, means unwarranted attention, too much. And you see that's the whole business in the material world, more or less, specifically in mundane relationships. What is it all about? Well, it's all about the couple's sense gratification, and they're throwing God out of the picture. They want to be adored by each other. But it can be a contamination also within devotees' lives, wanting undue attention, adoration. Or what to speak of the social media thing, right? Did people like what I posted or whatever? It's
adoration loca.
So, but anyways, I guess in every position, every social, there's this subtle stuff going on. But then I was thinking about distinction. Now, I don't know if this is just an English vocabulary type of question, or which I think it is, but it's also in relation to maybe some examples, because when you ask somebody, okay, think about profit and adoration, things pop in people's minds quite easily, usually, right? Profit, adoration. Now, what pops in somebody's mind when you say distinction? So maybe we could give some examples, or we could.
How are we defining distinction? I have something in my head, but I
yes, that's one question, the definition, how we define distinction, and then what are some examples?
Well,
you have the
Prabhupada pulled those three out of a verse in the 19th chapter of the Madhya Lila. Rupa Goswami's instructions to Lord Chaitanya's instructions to Rupa Goswami, and the famous verse about wandering around for ages and ages in the universe, and the fortunate soul gets the seed of the creeper of devotion, the Bhakti Lata Bija, in the form of faith and in the form of instructions, the holy name. But then you have to water the seed. You have to cultivate the seed so it grows into a nice creeper and ultimately produces the fruit of love of Godhead. So this is one of the verses he's describing of the weeds. He calls it probably as unnecessary creeper. The weeds that can choke off the creeper. So the three of the six here. I'll just read them all, and the three of them are profit, adoration, distinction. Nishadachar kuti nati jiva hingsana labha puja pratishtadi yata upashaka gana. Now adi means there are others too. it means etc. But these are the 6 main ones. Some unnecessary creepers growing with the bhakti creeper are the creepers of behavior unacceptable for those trying to attain perfection. Nishidacharya means behavior that's not appropriate for a devotee. Kutinati, cheating, diplomacy, jiva hingsa, hurting other living beings such as animal slaughter, but also, there's a wonderful purport I won't get into now, it's the time, but it probably explains all of them. And then this labha, which is profit, greed. Puja is desire to be adored, adored for achieving from mundane people. And pratishta, now there's also pratishtasha, means the desire for this is also, in other words, there's pratishta adi, means there's others, but pratishta means becoming an important man in material calculation, like that, I hate to use this example, but I think if you just think of the former president, you've got them all 6. Labha, puja, narcissism. This is so. All of these are completely contrary. They're weeds that grow in the heart or are already in the heart, and this is when the people, why people are not receptive to bhakti. Their hearts are blocked and hardened. Jiva Hingsana, all this, the meat-eating Prabhupada would always talk about that. In the whole society, it creates this hard-heartedness toward everyone. So that's where labha, puja, and pratishta. There's a subtle difference between adoration achieved by satisfying mundane people and becoming an important man, where you can adore yourself. In other words, I deserved. Pratishta is a way in which you can deserve the puja. In other words, they're tied in. I'm so important. I should be just like this Durvasa Muni. He was full of this pratishta, but he wasn't getting enough puja. So he attacked Ambarish. Why is Ambarish? He's just a simple devotee. I'm the great yogi. Like that. So Krishna taught him a lesson.
You would say that distinction would be like attaining a. So you could say distinction is attaining a, for lack of a better word, or it sounds, but an enviable position,
Pratishta and puja are very close.
Yeah, they go together.
Puja is what you get if you get pratishta.
Yes,
so
okay.
You have a nice fame and a position, and so then people will.
Okay, because generally, without the position, you're not going to get the puja. I see. Okay.
Something that comes to my mind, and I hope it's appropriate, but thinking about what Srila Prabhupada achieved in terms of carrying out the order of his spiritual master, and it was really that vyavasayitmika intelligence, that one-pointed determination to carry that order out. And by the time Prabhupada did that, a lot of his contemporaries had distinguished themselves in different fields, and Prabhupada had also. Prabhupada's books, he was personally giving books to Prime Minister, like Governor of Uttar Pradesh was coming to the Janmashtami, he threw at Radha. It's like Prabhupada could have stayed exactly as he was and been very, very respected as a great authority of that tradition in India, and would have been just fine. And he would have been engaging in pure devotional service there. But he wasn't attached to that distinguished position at the pinnacle of a career, so to speak. And because of that, it seems, like that one lecture Prabhupada said, the disciple thinks my spiritual master wants this, I have to accomplish it, boss. You know what I mean? Like that one-pointed singular determination. So Prabhupada had all those things. He never tried for them, but he had them even before he came to the West. And when he came to the West, he became like nobody, right? Srimati Maharaji was thinking, how will you even eat? They're not going to show you. In India, you're dressed like that, you're a nice sadhu, you can just walk out the door and go door to door and you can live, you can eat, you can be maintained. What to speak of a distinguished person like Prabhupada. But to him, chuck all that over the railing, right, and just go for the service of his spiritual master. So, I was thinking in that sense how those things can be an impediment to our service, because they're going to create a certain comfort zone, that, okay, I've achieved this position within the realm of a spiritual movement, and not just sannyasi, like you're saying, whether you're grihastha, sannyasi, whatever, but like we can become comfortable with achievements within the realm of devotional service, but they might be somewhat contaminated by those, was it puja, pratista, labha, whereas Prabhupada kind of showed that example, utility is the principle, bang, just, anyway, I hope that's an example. Yeah, that's why he's the acharya. Anything else?
We also see because some may say, hey, well, isn't there a human need? Now, what's the difference between, a lot of people would say, there's a human need to be loved, and part of love means there's a recognition there. It's like, for example, you're walking upstairs in the brahmachari ashram, the other brahmachari walks right by you, doesn't look at you, doesn't say anything to you. I mean, it's not happening upstairs, we have a good group, but and there's no like, Hari Bol, Jai, how are you? There's no recognition there. There's no sense of appreciation. So what's the difference between what a lot of people would accept as a need for appreciation versus this type of stuff,
right?
Like recognition, for example.
It's a very good question.
Like if someone says, hey, you distributed 100 books, and everybody, oh, so what, who cares, like, you kind of feel discouraged. Well, maybe nobody cares, maybe I shouldn't be doing this, maybe I should just go, versus the need for recognition, like as I'm an important person. So maybe you could comment on that.
Well, like one thing that came to my mind when you were explaining that, and it's a really, really important point, is that we should not be needing that in a sense, right? But we, towards the other devotees, we should be wanting to give that, isn't it? Like it's not Maya to want to glorify the other devotees for their service. Rather, it's actually what we're meant to do. We're meant to appreciate the other devotees in their service. We, the person who did the service that was, as Madhavendra Puri used to say, jai-worthy, right? We shouldn't be craving that necessarily. And sometimes we get it, sometimes we don't, right? And if we get it, we should just be offering it back to the other devotees. But like, we as devotees should be wanting to offer that to the devotees, because otherwise, where is our appreciation? Where is our bhakti? You know what I mean? Like, how are we going to, make progress if we don't appreciate the devotees? And it's kind of important, because when people are performing austerities, it can make our heart hard also. That's a danger, right? And without that loving, just like we read from that purport, Prabhupada says, Bhakti Yoga means the devotee is there, the Lord is there, the devotee is there, and the exchange of love between the devotee and the Lord is there, and that's Bhakti. So this is really all about exchanging of love. And if we want to make those exchanges of love with Krishna, we better learn to make them with his devotees, like...
Yes, I just had to mention this because I thought it was kind of funny. But my mother, she was here one time, and His Holiness Giraj Swami was giving a talk here. So then she asked him the question afterwards. She said, Maharaj, sometimes I want to praise the devotees. I want to tell them that, hey, you gave such a great class or something. And then he said, that's good. You should do that. You should praise the devotees. And then she said, yeah, but sometimes I'm worried. But like, what if I praise the devotee? He gave such a great. What if he becomes puffed up? And then my guru said, well, that's his problem. But anyway, so. But yeah, we should. It's natural. It's a human thing to appreciate, and we can't say, "Oh, we won't appreciate anybody," because again, that's something that they need to work on. I mean, accepting it gracefully, because there's a way to accept. Like Srila Prabhupada, he accepted the praise, the worship, everything gracefully, as a servant of his spiritual master and passing it on, and like that. He didn't say, "Oh no, I didn't. Don't do this, and don't praise me, don't do anything like that." But he was accepting as a loving exchange, like you were mentioning.
Right. Like that. What's that example? The transparency, right, has to be there, so that appreciation is going through the spiritual master into there and like that. Like when you read the concluding words of the Chaitanya Charitamrita yesterday, right? That's what it was all it was about. Prabhupada was just saying, my spiritual master inspired me to do this. He'd be so happy on this day that this was done. And, so like the disciple is always feeling that way, that, I am here by the grace of my superior acharyas and offering everything to them, whatever comes, as hard as... Yes, please.
One of the gates to hell. Tivadam narakasitam dwaram nasanam atmana kama krodha tata loba tasmarisha tajam chajet. But here's a devotee praying to become a miser. What is that? Vichayani vichinjani punak punak kripanasa dhananiva tvanamani bhavantanak. Compelled to constantly collect and count his precious hoard, the miser contemplates his wealth with avaricious aims. Please bless me to become a miser who's compelled, O Lord, to constantly collect and count and contemplate your names. Padyavali.
Haribol. Congrats. Oops. So thank you all. Hare Krishna, Grantaraj Srimad Bhagavatam ki jai. Srila Prabhupada ki jai.